Hi folks, how are you doing? So the long-awaited Carlsen-Anand rematch is already here. The D-Day is today, and we have already the first game in the books of this World Championship match in Sochi, November the 8th, 2014. Today we had the first game, which was very interesting. We had the contender Viswanathan playing with white pieces the first game, and the current world champion, the young talent from Norway, Magnus Carlsen, was black today. Let's see what happened, because the game was quite long and very interesting. We saw Anand playing this first game of the World Championship match in Sochi, 1d4. Really not a big surprise, as in the last year's match in Chennai, he couldn't find any serious thing against Carlsen's Berlin defense in 1-45 in the Ruy Lopez. And the only game he had serious chances of winning was that in the white side of that crazy Nimzo Indian. I'm sure you remember that. So not a big surprise. He tries his luck with 1d4, knight f6, c4, and g6. A slight surprise, we may say, because Carlsen has been playing the Nimzo Indian more than anything lately. But of course he has a very wide opening repertoire, and he has been preparing for this match for months. So we can't be surprised by any normal opening here. Knight c3, and Carlsen plays the Grunfeld d5. A slight surprise, but I mean, Magnus hasn't been the most regular follower of the Grunfeld with black pieces, but he has played it more than once against the best players in the world, of course, with very good results. And well, it was one of the possible openings. I think almost everybody, at least me, I was expecting the Nimzo Indian or something in the kind of a Nimzo Indian sit up, maybe a Queen's Gambit declined, but the Grunfeld was a slight surprise. But let us see what happened. C takes, knight takes, bishop d2. Not the main line, not the classical main line, which is of course e4, knight takes, b takes. This move was rather rare and unusual some years ago. Moskalenko, the Ukrainian GM, was playing it and saying it was very good, and now recently it has been very popular among the elite players. Anand himself had used it a couple of times, so it's not that much of a surprise he plays this bishop d2 with the idea of recapturing on c3 with the bishop whenever the knight takes, e4, knight takes. Usually white takes there with the b pawn, but when you have the bishop here, the idea is to take with the bishop and have a strong bishop here to fight, to oppose against this bishop on g7, which is going to be always the pride of the black's position in a Grunfeld defense. So it's kind of an attempt to neutralize this bishop on g7, putting a bishop on your own on the beautiful and strong c3 square. Bishop g7, e4 was played, and after knight takes, of course, bishop takes there. So we have what white was looking for, a bishop on c3 to neutralize the strong bishop on g7 of black. Carlsen castles, and there are a couple of main alternatives here, main moves. Knight f3 is the move Anand didn't choose. He went for queen d2, already showing some aggressive intentions, like to castle long, to play h4, h5, and try to go for an immediate kingside attack. Of course, this is not a blitz game, but this could be a long-term plan for white, as long castle is already there, and in any case looks to be a very promising position for both players to make this a really sharp game. Knight c6 was played by Carlsen. Already we're going into not that well-known territory. At least there are not that much. There isn't that much great number of games between GMs. Last year, just to mention it, it was interesting that Hammer, Ludwig van Hammer, of course one of the seconds of Magnus Carlsen, played this c5 critical line against Anand himself with white pieces, and they got this very sharp position after the bishops were exchanged. e6, d6, e5, isolating that d6 from reinforcements. h4 was played, and after bishop e6, knight h3, hammer dared to take the pawn, queen takes h4, and the position was crazy and very interesting, quite a sharp game. So you can bet Carlsen knew this line by heart, as he second had played this against Anand himself. So he rather goes for knight c6, putting immediately pressure on d4 pawn. Knight f3. Very few games, as I said, with this line between GMs. This is almost a new position between GMs, at least. That's what says the database I was looking at. There is, for instance, a rapid game of this year between Moisenko and Nepomniachtchi. Also, the Austrian top player Markus Rager had tried this as white, this line, but not that much anymore on the database. Bishop g4 is played here by Magnus Carlsen, forcing this pawn to go forward, as there is too much pressure already there on d4. There is no way of keeping it to defend it if it's in d4. So d5 is forced with the upcoming simplifications, as we're gonna see. Carlsen takes on f3, and before taking on f3 with the pawn, Anand makes this intermediate capture of the bishop on g7, king takes, and g takes f3, getting quite an interesting position. I mean, this is the first game of a World Championship match. These games are usually quite short and not that sharp. There, players are just measuring each other's knowledge in the theory, and usually they make more or less short draw, like last year. But this is already quite an interesting position. I mean, it doesn't mean it wasn't going to be a short draw, but white has definitely some attacking perspectives on the king side, open lines, the open diagonal from c3 to g7, h8. But on the other hand, he has doubled pawns here on f2 and f3, which are not that great in a future middle game to come. So quite an unbalanced and interesting position, I think. Knight e5, and Anand castled here. Both players, I think, had surely foreseen all these, as they were playing quite quickly at this point. Already 13 moves. Here c6 was played by Carlsen, very precise and natural move, attacking the pawn central structure. Of course, in case anybody was wondering, taking on f3 wasn't going to be that great to start a World Championship match, as it blunders the knight with queen c3 double attack against the king and the knight. But instead c6 is very natural and solid. Anand still goes queen c3, attacking the knight, which is pinned now on the diagonal. Also, there is another pin now on the d file, and there is an only move, not that hard to find for black, but enough to keep the equality and the solidness of his position. f6, defending the knight. Bishop h3 was played. This move is very important because, well, there wasn't any great place here on this diagonal for this bishop to come, but this bishop is quite an important piece on these diagonals. It's guarding c8, which is going, as you can already foresee, is going to be very important for tactical reasons to guard there with the bishop. Also e6 is a fancy place the bishop could go to, having an interesting blockade here on light squares. c takes, e takes was played, and now we can see that this bishop is saving white from being lost, as rook c8 would be winning the queen. So, and well, in here we have now an isolated pawn, an isolated queen pawn for Anand for white, which could be both weak and strong. Well, you know, the eternal debate of that. Sometimes it's an offensive weapon, sometimes it's a weakness. We have an unbalanced position in any case. Not that bad for to beat for the first game of the World Championship match. The knight now goes to f7, and knight going to d6 would be one of the main ideas I could imagine, and Nimzowicz, I bet, would be proud of Carlsen using this knight as a perfect blockader of the passed pawn. But Anand plays f4, which also, well, stops this knight from going back from e to e5 or g5 anytime soon. Also gives himself the possibility I guess, to play f5 sometimes to try to open up the g file, creating more pressure on the king side, and somehow finally have any attacking chance on against black king. But now that the pawn is on f4, Carlsen takes the opportunity to play queen to d6, attacking the pawn. Queen d4 was played, f4 is protected. Rook a d8, you can see Carlsen is fastly developing his rooks to the central d file, attacking the weakness of white, the d5 isolated pawn. Now bishop e6, now it's defended. We saw this could be a potentially good square for the bishop to come here. And queen b6, Carlsen was offering here an exchange of queens, which was certainly a possibility, and oops, sorry, that was too fast. Certainly a possibility, creating more imbalances in my opinion in the position. If the queens were to be exchanged, both players would have isolated doubled pawns. White would have them on the f file, black Carlsen would have here b file, on the b file, isolated doubled pawns, and we would have tons of open files. The c and the a file could be interesting for black to try to take advantage of them. Meanwhile, white could try to have still some attack on the g file going on with g file, with maybe f5 or h4 or both of them. The d pawn definitely could be used both by white and black to attack it or to use it as a offensive weapon. So this was a possibility, maybe somehow equal, but with dynamic possibilities for both. But instead, Carlsen-Anand didn't want to exchange queens so far. He went queen d2. Rook d6, blockading this pawn with a rook. This is interesting because usually knights are the better blockaders of advanced pawns, but not in this case, because the rook cannot be chased from here, so it's not a bad piece there to put more pressure to double up pawns, to double up rooks on the d file. Sorry. Rook h e1 and knight d8. With this move, suddenly Carlsen gets some pressure. Now he's threatening to win a pawn on e6. If it was black to play, he just takes on e6. Rook takes, pawn takes, and black takes there. Of course, the pawn cannot take there first because the queen would be hanging. So there is certainly some pressure with these moves against the central d pawn of white, and f5 was played here, defending e6. But now anyway, knight took here on e6. It would be a great mistake here to take with the f pawn, something people like me could think of at the first sight, because you know, you kind of keeping your pawns strong, you're undoubling pawns. But now all of a sudden, after rook f d8, d5 is falling, and certainly with some very serious consequences. Now white is, I think, completely lost here. He's losing d5, he's losing most probably e6, and black pieces are rolling. And that's why it was very important here to take with the rook, of course not with the d pawn. Queen is hanging on d2. Queen c7 check was played here, king b1, rook c8. Carlsen gets good control of the open c file. Rook d e1, attacking a little bit on on e7, and rooks are exchanged here on e6, definitely getting a better position for Carlsen, for black, slightly better, just like those he loves a lot. I mean, I think he has better pieces. The queen and the rook are completely controlling the open c file, which gives black some activity against the slightly weak white king. White also has a couple of weak pawns here, on especially on d5, on f2, h2 potentially weak as well. f5 isn't clear what's going to happen with it. On the other hand, black has a clear weakness, of course, on e7, and somehow this rook of white is a good piece, controlling here, attacking e7. So one could argue this is better for black. I think it is better for black, maybe slightly equal, but according to the engine, but I think it's more comfortable to be black here, at least in my Padzer opinion. Rook d8 was played, and queen e3 attacking e7, and rook d7 defending it. there is some tension here, but of course both players are more or less able to keep their solid positions. d6, and Anand is getting rid of his d pawn. E takes, and of course he's getting it back with queen d4, attacking both f6 and d6 at the same time. Black has to give back one of the pawns, and of course it's much better to give d7, which Anand takes after taking on g6 with the pawn. Now he gets rid of his doubled pawns, at least that f5 pawn is not going to be any problem anymore, and rook takes d6. He solved his some of the problems with his big weak pawns, with the d pawn, with the f5 pawn. Still the position looks slightly better for black, I think, although white got more active pieces right now with the control of the d file, but the position is I mean, with some possibilities, but rock solid it seems for black. I think Carlsen was happy with this position. He played a6, a3, and queen a5, giving the queen more possibilities to control the board, to go through the fifth rank, to go to e1 with a check if he wishes. f4 was played, and now queen h5. We're attacking h2, for instance. Queen to d2, controlling both weak squares on f2, both weak pawns, sorry, on f2 and h2. f4 and h2, queen c5, rook d5, queen c4, maneuvering a little, queen to rook to d7, and now queen goes to c6 in case Anand takes on f7, exchanging rooks. Now queen controls the dangerous d7 square. Queen to d7 check wouldn't be possible now. It was very important to control the penetration of the white queen. Rook goes back to d6, and queen e4 check, king a2, and finally Carlsen is able to get his rook to the open e file and try to activate his rook. Queen to c1, pawn to a5, queen f1, pawn to a4. Interesting, after 41 moves we have still a very interesting position. Now black got this very strong pawn here on a4, cramping white's king, really making this king feeling a little bit miserable about life, and this is a slight problem for black here. Sorry, for Anand, for white. He goes rook to d1, protecting back rank, and queen c2. After rook d4, rook e2. It's clear, and Anand got a worse position. He has to defend, and he's right now one move away from being checkmated. Fortunately for him, he's just in time to defend b2, defending checkmate, but it certainly doesn't feel very great to be defending like this with white pieces, especially against Magnus Carlsen in the first game of a World Championship rematch. The position is uncomfortable for white. White king certainly doesn't look very good. It's really unsafe there, and black gets lots of two very active pieces, much better pieces than white rook and queen. b5 was played here. Once again, taking on b5 would be embarrassing, as queen c4 check, winning the rook would be not very normal at this level, of course, in case anybody was wondering. But here Anand had to find really precise moves, as he's in a very passive and difficult situation, and well, you can bet he was trying really hard. Finally he finds the only move which keeps the equality for his position, really kind of a miracle save. Just to illustrate, if he tries something else like queen h3 with the idea to check here, to have some perpetual check from d7, black had this queen c7 move, not only stopping white from checking on d7, but only having this own queen f7 check in mind. And just look at this white king, he's going to the back rank. Rook could check there from e1. Doesn't smell good for white, right? This could be most probably losing for Anand. So this was, by the way, the second best move white had here, so it was very important for Viswanathan to find the precise queen h1, which he finally did, saving the position, saving the day for the former world champion from India. Now rook e7 is played, as the check on b7 was threatened, getting lots of activity against black king and getting counter attack, counter chances. Now queen d5, rook back to e1. Black is just one move away, Magnus Carlsen is just one move away from checkmating his rival Viswanathan, but fortunately for Indian fans and Anand, he had these perpetual checks. After 48 move, queen d7 check, players agreed this was a draw, and they called the day in this first game of the World Championship rematch Sochi 2014. Thanks for watching.